Hello and welcome. This is Yon Cheku with NSM TV, bringing you the latest news. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has delivered his first public message since taking office. He called for national unity and warned that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed as a tool of pressure. Khamenei also said U.S. bases in the region could be targeted if they are not shut down. Iran's new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, has delivered his first public message since being appointed to lead the Islamic Republic. The message was broadcast by Iranian state television and read by a presenter, while Khamenei himself has not yet appeared in public. According to international media, the new leader has not been seen publicly since his day of appointment was announced. Sources familiar with the situation said he suffered a leg fracture and minor injuries during the first day of bombing by the United States and Israel. In his message, the new supreme leader called on Iranians to remain united at what he described as a critical moment for the country. He also warned that the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important oil shipping routes in the world, will continue to remain closed and will be used as leverage against Iran's adversaries. Khamenei also issued a direct warning to the United States, stating that all American bases in the region must be closed. Otherwise, they could become targets of attacks. However, he emphasized that Iran intends to maintain friendly relations with neighboring countries, and that Tehran's targets are only the U.S. bases located on their territory. U.S. intelligence assessments indicate that Iran's regime is not showing signs of imminent collapse, despite the war with the United States and Israel. Airstrikes have killed several senior officials and damaged Tehran's military capabilities, but they have not seriously threatened the regime's control of power. Meanwhile, the Trump administration says the main objective of the war is weakening Iran's missile and nuclear programs. Iran's regime is not showing signs of imminent collapse even after nearly 2 weeks since the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran began. This is according to the latest assessments from the U.S. intelligence, cited by sources familiar with the situation. According to these assessments, the bombing campaign has eliminated dozens of senior Iranian officials, including the supreme leader, and has significantly damaged Iran's missile capabilities. However, these strikes have not yet created a serious threat to the regime's hold on power in Tehran. Officials from the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump recently stated that the main objective of the war is weakening Iran's missile, nuclear, and naval programs. They emphasized that regime change is not the primary goal of the military operation, although it could be a possible consequence of the conflict. However, President Trump himself has frequently used harsh rhetoric against the Iranian government, calling it a terrorist regime that has been in power in Tehran for nearly 50 years. On the first day of the conflict, he called on Iranians to rise up against their government and overthrow it. Meanwhile, Trump has also demanded Iran's unconditional surrender before halting the attacks. The average gasoline price in the United States has risen to $3.6 per gallon, marking the biggest weekly and monthly increases since March of 2022. The rise is linked to the war in Iran and the partial closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a key route for 20% of the world's oil. Gasoline prices in the United States have reached an average of $3.6 per gallon, according to the latest data. This represents an increase of 35 cents in just the past week and 65 cents over the past month, marking the largest weekly and monthly increases since March of 2022, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and major sanctions on the oil producer. Industry experts explain that the latest increase is linked to the war in Iran and the partial closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a key channel through which 20% of the world's oil passes. Iranian attacks on oil facilities in the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia have increased concerns about global supply and pushed prices significantly higher. After U.S. President Donald Trump said the end of the war was very close, oil prices temporarily fell. However, attacks on ships near the Strait of Hormuz pushed prices up again. Crude oil futures rose above $100 per barrel in early trading, signaling that American consumers could face further increases in fuel prices. This trend could affect the everyday economy of Americans by increasing transportation and goods costs, while authorities monitor developments in the Middle East to assess the stability of energy supplies. Iran's Revolutionary Guard forces attacked a U.S.-owned vessel near Basra, causing a large explosion and one fatality. The ship, Safesa Vishnu, was sailing under the Marshall Islands flag and was hit by an unmanned explosive device. The rest of the crew was rescued, while Iranian media said the ship had ignored warnings from the Revolutionary Guard. An attack on a U.S. ship shook the Persian Gulf region early Thursday morning. According to the Iranian state news agency Fars, which is linked to the Revolutionary Guard, the ship, Safesa Vishnu, was struck in the northern Gulf near Basra in Iraqi waters. Reports say 2 other oil tankers were also attacked in the same area. The Fars agency released a video showing the moment of a large explosion on the ship during the night. Indian authorities said the attack was carried out by a white, unmanned speedboat filled with explosives, which crashed into the vessel and caused a large fire on board. 1 crew member was killed, while the rest of the crew was rescued. The Iranian agency said the attack occurred after the ship failed to comply with warnings issued by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The incident increases tensions in an already volatile region, raising concerns about the safety of oil transport and global energy markets. Israel's airstrikes on Iran were carried out without a realistic plan for a regime change. Sources in Tel Aviv say expectations were that joint attacks with the United States would trigger another wave of uprisings, but intelligence information was not entirely accurate. Israel's airstrikes against Iran, according to Israeli security sources, were carried out without a clear plan for a regime change in Tehran. Many expectations that the attacks could trigger a popular uprising were described as unrealistic hopes and a consequence of intelligence that was not entirely accurate. Iran has survived nearly 2 weeks of attacks, including an assassination attempt on Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, while U.S. President Donald Trump is publicly considering ending a war that is becoming increasingly costly. Israeli defense and intelligence sources have expressed particular concern over 440 kilograms of enriched uranium that remain under Iranian control, which could potentially be used to build more than 10 nuclear weapons. Experts warn that if these materials are not removed or securely stored, it could mark the beginning of Iranian efforts to build a nuclear bomb. Some former Israeli military officials described this as a key test for the success of the war, emphasizing that any victory that leaves the uranium in Iran's hands could turn into a strategic defeat. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova sharply criticized comments by U.S. President Donald Trump about a possible takeover of Cuba. She said Russia will provide full political and diplomatic support to Havana and described the remarks as illegal and contrary to international law. Zakharova also stressed that U.S. economic pressure on Cuba is unprecedented and should be resolved through diplomatic channels. Russia has strongly reacted to statements by U.S. President Donald Trump about a possible takeover of Cuba, calling such rhetoric illegal and contrary to international law. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said Moscow will continue to provide political and diplomatic support to Havana, defending Cuba's right to cooperate legally with the international community. Zakharova stressed that Cuba is facing unprecedented economic, trade, and financial pressure from the United States after nearly 7 decades of blockade. She emphasized that the use of force or threats of force is absolutely unacceptable and that any dispute should be resolved through diplomatic channels. Russia pledged to support the Cuban people during what it described as a historic and difficult period, ensuring that any attempt to hinder international cooperation within Cuba is unacceptable. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul said that any solution for security in the Strait of Hormuz can only be achieved through diplomacy. He called for Gulf countries and regional neighbors to unite their interests to find a way out of the conflict. Wadephul added that developments must consider regional stability and the possible consequences for refugee movements. A sustainable and reliable solution for security in the Strait of Hormuz can only be achieved through diplomatic channels, according to German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul. During a visit to Turkey, Wadephul said it is important to unite the shared interests of Gulf countries as well as neighboring states in the region to find a way out of the ongoing conflict affecting this strategic area. Iran's reaction to the actions of the United States and Israel has included attacks on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. forcing the halt of non-Iranian shipping traffic and reducing oil production from countries in the region. Vodafone stressed that regional coordination is key to preventing further escalation and maintaining stability in the area, while also considering humanitarian consequences such as possible refugee movements from Iran toward Turkey. He added that governments must work together to ensure developments in the region are managed through diplomacy and dialogue, avoiding dangerous escalation and protecting the interests of civilian populations. Vodafone also emphasized the importance of shared international responsibility in maintaining the security of this vital channel for oil exports from the Middle East. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer admitted he made a mistake in appointing Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. He apologized to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein for the decision and took personal responsibility for the error. Starmer said full information cannot yet be released due to investigations by the Metropolitan Police, but stressed that the responsibility is his. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has publicly admitted that he made a mistake in appointing Peter Mandelson as the United Kingdom's ambassador to Washington. During a meeting with the local community in Northern Ireland, Starmer said the decision was his personal mistake and apologized to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, taking responsibility for it. Starmer explained that the publication of government documents about Mandelson's appointment has raised further questions, but due to investigations by the Metropolitan Police, the full information cannot yet be made public. However, he insisted that the blame and responsibility for the mistake are his and again apologized to the victims. The Prime Minister also recalled that Peter Mandelson had previously left office in a disgraceful manner and stressed the need for transparency and accountability in decision-making. The parliamentary majority rejected a request from the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office to authorize the arrest of former Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Balluku. 82 socialist deputies and their allies voted against the request, while 47 MPs supported SPAC. Parliament rejected the request of the Special Prosecution Against Organized Crime and Corruption, SPAC, to authorize the arrest of MP Belinda Balluku through the replacement of the security measure. With 82 votes against and 47 in favor, Parliament rejected the request, for which representatives of both the majority and the opposition in the Council for Rules, Mandates and Immunity presented two different reports. At the opening of the session, Democratic Party MP Oerd Bulukbashi, a member of the Council for Rules, Mandates and Immunity, presented the opposition report, stating that it supported the request of the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecution to lift the immunity of MP Belinda Balluku, paving the way for stricter security measures against the socialist lawmaker. Bulukbashi emphasized that immunity should not be turned into a shield for impunity or an obstacle to justice. After him, Socialist Party MP Ulsi Manya spoke on behalf of the majority. The head of the Parliamentary Committee on Laws and members of the Council for Rules, Mandates and Immunity read the report prepared by the majority. Manya said this was the seventh request from the prosecution brought to Parliament seeking authorization to arrest a deputy or conduct a personal or home search. At the end of the presentations, members of Parliament voted against the draft decision authorizing SPAC to lift the immunity of MP Belinda Balluku. Out of 121 MPs present, 47 voted in favor and 82 against, while 7 MPs did not take part in the vote. Following the vote, Democratic Party MPs blocked the parliamentary podium and banged their hands on the desks. The head of the Socialist Party parliamentary group, Taulat Bala, then requested that draft laws and decisions on the agenda proceed to voting due to the impossibility of continuing the session. Prime Minister Edi Rama reacted after statements by the British and German embassies regarding the latest developments in Parliament. He stressed that the government fully agrees with the principles expressed in those statements. Rama also underlined that the governing majority remains focused on Albania's integration into the European Union by 2030. Prime Minister Edi Rama welcomed the statements of the embassies of the United Kingdom and Germany, emphasizing that the Albanian government shares the same principles expressed by them. In a reaction on social media, Rama said the governing majority remains focused on the strategic objective of European integration, describing the country's direction towards the European Union by 2030 as unwavering. His statements came after Parliament rejected the request to remove Belinda Ballucu's freedom, a decision that, according to Rama, was taken because the conditions were not met to take such an extreme step. He stressed that Parliament's decision was in line with the standards and democratic practices applied in European countries. The head of government also underlined that the justice reform is irreversible and that the independence of the judiciary remains untouchable. Rama assured that support for justice institutions, including SPAC, will remain firm, while the fight against corruption will continue with intensity. He also stated that Ballucu is not accused of corruption and that investigations must continue without interference or pressure from actors outside the justice system. According to Rama, Parliament's decision today was a process based on constitutional and legal norms that guarantee the balance between powers and do not represent an obstacle for the prosecution, but rather an unlimited authorization to act without institutional oversight. This is all we have prepared for you today. Thank you for joining us.